Just three ordinary guys trying to understand the crazy world around them. We don't have all the answers, but we've got all the questions. You're listening to Just Add Bourbon with Jimmy, JD, and Brad.
Welcome, everybody, to the Just Add Bourbon podcast. I'm Jimmy Don Kerr.
I'm Brad Broaddus.
And I'm JD Dammer.
And guys, we're meeting here tonight for the second interview in our series on the opioid epidemic here in Eastern Kentucky. And our guest tonight is James Maynard. I've known James pretty much my whole life. I grew up in the church where he preached. James was a good friend of my grandmother, Catherine Klein, and they studied the Bible a lot together. I know that she looked up to James a great deal and talked about what a good man he was. And I think you probably did the same thing. When you had Bible questions, you would go to her.
Many times.
And so I've known James my whole life. I know JD has a special relationship with James as well. But we asked James to come here tonight because at some point in James's life, he became addicted to opioids. And James has been kind enough to sit down with us tonight and kind of tell us his story. So James, we appreciate you coming and sitting down.
I appreciate being here and appreciate the opportunity to share my story. I have a lot of people say that, we should be quiet about it. Shouldn't say anything. I said, I grew up in this community. And I can't be anonymous because everybody knew me. Everybody still knows me in this community. But I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. My problem, I started out, I grew up in Beauty. I lived down there, still live there. I grew up around a lot of men when I was a child. I saw a lot of men that were alcoholics. And the little community I grew up in, I probably saw 8 or 9 men die because of alcohol. I grew up, and one of the things was drugs back then, years ago. When I got to be a teenager, you get to run around, you get with the wrong crowd, and I started drinking a little bit. I kind of enjoyed the alcohol at that time in high school, and I met my wife when Sheldon Clark and we consolidated Warfield and Inez. And one thing she told me real quick, she said, "I'm not going to marry an alcoholic." She didn't know she was going to marry a drug addict, though. And I quit drinking right then. I was baptized in April the 26th, 1975. I preached my first gospel sermon 10 months later. I've been at the Inez Church of Christ ever since on Coldwater Road. I've been a preacher there, full-time minister. I preach now. I teach Bible class every week. And I'm thankful for that opportunity. So I went for years, and I raised my children. I raised 3 children. None of them ever saw their daddy take a drink of alcohol. They never saw their daddy take a drug in their life. Yeah, in this area, coal mining is about the only thing we had. And so I'd work in the coal mines for a while, and we'd get laid off. I'd preach full-time at the church. I was full-time minister for many years. And how you do in the coal mines, if you've worked any at all, or if you talk to any coal miners, you get hurt from time to time. And so the way my addiction started, I would work, I'd get hurt. I'd go to a doctor, and a doctor would prescribe pain pills. And that was my addiction. I never done anything other than opiates. Took those. I could take those then in the beginning. I'd take them when I quit hurting, I'd lay them down. Never fool with them again. And this went on for several years, and I had no problem with drugs. I'd get hurt. I'd go to the doctor, take them, lay them down. One day I got hurt, and I went to the doctor, and I was prescribed opiates. I took them. I couldn't lay them down. They took a hold of my life at that time. This was when I was in my late 40s. I'm 64 years old now, and like I said, I've done everything in my power. I tried to live a good life. You mentioned your grandmother, one of the greatest women I ever knew. Mentor to me, she was. Your mom, great people. And I preached probably hundreds and hundreds of funerals. I conducted hundreds of weddings over the years, and I never had a problem with that. But like I say, that one time I took one drug and I couldn't lay it down. In the very beginning, when I took and I remember the first opiate I ever took in my life was a Darvocet. I never felt anything like that in my life. I always tried to chase that high to get that same feeling. Years later, I never could get that same high. I took a lot stronger medication, but I never did get that same feeling that I got for that one in the beginning. I went through, I'd try to work, try to be preaching 4 times, I began, I could function on drugs for a while. I could work in the mines, I'd only take drugs maybe once on the weekend. And I'd maybe only do that once a month. And then it got to where it was every weekend. And then later on, it began to be every day. And I'd start, I'd go into mines. I went into the mines. If I didn't have an opiate, I would be sick as a dog. And I look back now, and when I was on drugs in the mines, I was a danger, not only to myself, but the men I work with. And I thank God that I never killed anyone in the coal mines on drugs. So I went through that, I was still, and then I'd try to preach 4 times. I could still function. Then it got to a point, I couldn't function anymore. I began to lie to people. I would go to people and I would tell someone that, someone else needs these drugs. And I'd get them and I was the one taking them. And I'd done that for a while. And, I kept that hid for a long time. And then it got to a point, though, that I couldn't keep it hid any longer. My wife and my children, my grown children, they didn't know what in the world was going on with me. They couldn't figure out what was going on. I've got a wife today that the reason I'm here today is because of God and my wife. That they didn't give up on me. My wife, she got very angry. She still, when we talk about it, it hurts her. She gets very angry today. I went to the point, I remember the first time I went and tried to get any treatment at all, I went to Belfont, and I went in and stayed 4 days. And I came out there, and, I was supposed to be cured from addiction. But I stayed clean for 19 days. That's the longest I'd went in a long time, up to that point. And I tried to work, and but it got to a point I couldn't work. And I got laid off, and I had a great friend of mine I grew up with in childhood was the superintendent. He tried every way in the world to give me, keep me a job. But it got to the point that, he couldn't do that because if I'd have killed somebody, he'd been responsible. Me and my wife, at this point, my wife had got to the point she'd had enough. She took all she could take. So she moved out. The first time she moved out, she moved into an apartment, and it broke my heart when she done that. I went to her apartment, and the first night she was there, I saw guys out that lived in that apartment complex that I'd seen them buy drugs where I bought drugs. And I told her, I said, "You're leaving me and you coming here." She said, "They're not in my house." And we stayed separated probably for a year. Then we filed legal separation. She did. She didn't want any part of it. And so that went on for over a year there. And I finally came to myself and I said, I want to get straightened up. I quit cold turkey. I never took any drugs to get off. I didn't take any to stay off. I've quit cold turkey twice. I've almost died both times doing it, but it worked for me. And we finally got back together. And I never will forget my 2 older brothers told Marlene that if you come home, said if he does it again, said he'll be the one to hit the road. So we would throw him out on his head. And I stayed clean for 364 days. I got hurt on October the 12th, 2012. And I tore a muscle in my leg. I was bruised from my hip all the way to my knee, all the way down. My leg was swelled about twice as big as it normally was. And every time my heartbeat hit, the pain would shoot plumb through my body. And I thought I could take one pill, to make that quit hurting. And I could go ahead and then lay it down. Well, that one pill cost me 3 years of my life. And after that, I was in full-blown addiction. My wife run me off. She took all she could take of it. My children, they still love me, but they'd had enough. During that time, I shut my pancreas down twice. It shut plumb down. I would go for maybe a week or two, and I would throw up the whole time. And I finally went to the doctor, and the first time I went, I remember I was down to Louise at my daughter's house, and I was trying to get back home because I was so sick. And I remember my mother and dad lived on Black Log, and I remember going out there on her porch, and my mom's back porch. They bought a new triple wide trailer and put in there, and I was staying in the old house at that time by myself out there, and I remember laying down on that porch, and I thought I was dying right then, and I can remember my mom saying, "James, don't lay here and die." And somehow I got to Dr. Chapin's office over there. Doc called the ambulance for me, and he sent me straight to Louise. And the thing that I remember, I can't remember a whole lot about it, but I can remember being in the ambulance in front of his office, and there was someone got in the ambulance and trying to give me an opiate right then, and me in the ambulance. And I remember that to this day. But I went down there, and there was a good doctor down there. He came in my room, and he had a chart, and he had been a doctor to my father-in-law. That's how I knew him, and I requested him to be my doctor. And he came in, he started questioning me. He asked me, he said, "How long have you been an alcoholic?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You've shut your pancreas down." He said, "How much do you drink a day?" I said, "Doc, I haven't drank anything in 35 years. And he said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "I take a lot of pills." And he had that chart, and he threw that chart up, and it bounced off the ceiling. He said, "Son, you killed yourself, and you don't realize it." And he begged me at that time. He said, "I can get you in treatment," and said, "I can help you get off this stuff." And I told him, I said, when I get off, I'll get off myself. I said, "I'll do it myself." So I got through that, and probably 6 months later, you'd think that would have been enough to scare me out to get my life right. I went right back to opiates. I done the same thing 6 months later, and I called the ambulance myself, and he told me, he came in, he said, "Son," he said, "you will never get here again the third time." He said, "I don't know why you're alive today," and I'd shut that down, but I went right back to it. I lost everything I had. I remember there one time, I could sit here all night and tell you about stuff that I done and was involved in the sickening thing it was, but I got a credit card, and it was $12,000 limit. I maxed that thing out in 2 months, $200 a day, and with that credit card. But I had people that enabled me. Listen, I don't blame anyone for my addiction. I never blamed anyone then. I don't blame any doctor then. I don't blame anyone that I ever bought a pain pill off of. I don't blame people that enable me. I take full responsibility for it, because if you don't, you never get better. A lot of folks in addiction today, they want to blame everybody else for the reason they done. I done that. I don't believe it's an addiction. I know people argue me over that. I'd have never had this problem if I hadn't put the first pain pill in my mouth. But like I said, I had family enable me. We went through a fortune, money. And I was there by myself. I got paranoid. If you come in the bedroom where I slept at, I had blankets over every wall. Over the walls and the windows. And any noise at all, I was paranoid. I would take and lay down at night. And I would lay down and I'd be in my bed. And I'd wake up 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would be up the holler, probably half a mile from my house. Don't know how I got there. Or it'd be up the road, probably a mile from the house. I had a rifle with me. And I don't know how I got there. And those things, when you do them, you'd think that would straighten you up. I remember I'd be at the zinc, and I'd pass out. And I remember falling back, and it was stone floor. And I would hit my back of my head. I don't see why in the world it didn't bust it open. And I'd do that, or I'd be sitting in a chair in the bathroom, and I would fall into the washer and dryer was in there. And I'd come to myself, and I'd be in the floor there, be a knot on me. But you'd think that would straighten me up. But it didn't. I kept on doing that, and like I said, I would buy drugs. I got to the point to where I would buy them off people on the street. Doctors, the doctor, he got tired of fooling with me. And like I said, I don't blame him. He tried to talk to me every time he ever wrote a prescription. He warned me about it, and I wouldn't listen. But I done that. I lived by myself there. My brother was county attorney, and people says, well, your brother wouldn't do nothing to you because you were his brother. Well, they don't know my brother. He would call the sheriff, and they would look for me, and I would hide. And I had the sheriff come to me many times, and he'd say, where were you at? So we were going to arrest you. And I said, well, I knew you all had to sleep sometime. I'd wait till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning before I got on the road. And I never was real bad to travel. I'd go get my drugs, I'd come back. And I'd usually stay there. But I'd drive, and I'd get what they call the nods. And if you ever seen that on TV, you know what it is. And I would be in a vehicle, and I'd do that. And I've almost wrecked 4 or 5 times. I said, I don't know why in the world that I'm alive today other than God blessed me. And I didn't kill someone. I would come to myself, and I'd be heading on the other side of the road right toward a vehicle, and it loaded down with a family. And I thank God that he spared my life and their life. But that went on for 3 years. Brother Keenis and my wife, they'd found a place that they would take for 90 days. They would have took me and kept me. And I remember, just like it's yesterday, I told them, I said, I can't give 90 days of my life up. I gave up over 3 years of my life to addiction. And like I said, I've lost family members that died that I gave them money to go buy the last drug they ever took. And I live with that every day of my life. And I've asked God to forgive me of that. But I lost a baby brother that I love dearly. And I'm the man giving him the last dollar for the last pill he ever bought. And I've got to live with that. But my children still love me. And people, you hear people say to someone's in addiction today, they'll say, why don't you just quit? Quitting's easy. I quit 1,000 times. The hard part was staying quit. Like I said, I took them in the beginning because I liked the feeling. I had to take them in the end to keep me alive because of the sickness. If anyone's never went through withdrawal from opiates, I feel sorry for them. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And I would throw up, diarrhea, you get the sweats, you'd freeze to death one minute, you burn up the next. And I was alone. My children got to the point, and my wife got to the point, they said, Dad, we don't want to hear what you're going to do. Show us what you're going to do. And that went on for, like I said, over 3 years. And I never will forget the thing that got me to want to quit. I mean, I wanted to quit all the time. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd be screaming and crying. And I'd be begging God to take this addiction away from me. And done that I don't know how many times. I mean, I would literally be bawling and screaming. And like I said, I served God for years. And when I got in addiction, I couldn't see God nowhere. I lost all hope in God. I mean, I lost my faith in God. I look back now, I lost my hope. I see now that God was with me everywhere. When I was heading toward those cars, God was there. When I got to the point that I didn't care if I lived or died. That's how bad it got. I tried to commit suicide several times. I don't know if you all know what a Roxy 30 is. I would take 30 of those things at one time to try to bust my heart. And I don't know why I didn't. God had a bigger plan for me than I knew then. But on a Sunday, I never will forget it. On September the 7th, 2014, there was a guy from Paintsville. His name is Larry Joe Bays. I went to church with Larry Joe, and he called me on a Sunday, and he said, James, I want you to know. He said, I love you. He said, but I want you to know also there's not a person in this world believes the word you say right now. And I was, like I said, 35 years, I was a man. I had as good a name in Martin County as any man in Martin County. And I got to thinking, I said, I don't want to be remembered that way. And it was like a light switch clicked off my head. I had people visit me. I had people come from Tennessee to my house when I was by myself, talk to me, beg me to quit, sit down, cry with me, pray for me. Had them come from Ohio. JD came to my house, begged me to quit and get off drugs. And I'll never forget that. I'll remember that long as I live, and I appreciate you doing that. But from that day forward, I locked myself in my house. For 2 weeks, I almost died from withdrawal. And I thought I was going to die. I went cold turkey. And like I said, I went cold turkey. I stopped taking the drug on that day, on the 7th of 2014, September. I haven't taken the drug since. I quit cold turkey. People said, well, what do you take now to stay off drugs? I don't take nothing. I didn't take nothing to get off. I don't take nothing to stay off. I went cold turkey. It worked for me. And like I was talking to some folks, whatever works best for you. I don't agree with what's going on in the addiction community of helping people. I think they're hurting people more by giving them Suboxone and methadone than they are helping them. But if that works for them, I say take it. But it didn't work for me. I look back now today and I thank God. I knew God. I can see now that God was right there with me every step of the way. And I can never praise Him. And people tell you, they'll say, boy, you're done good. But I give God all the credit. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for God and my family. And He had a bigger plan for me than I had for myself. And I've been clean those now going on almost 6 years I've been clean. And like I say, I get up every day and I pray a prayer to God. I prayed for over 5 years now. I asked God, I said, God, help me today to stay clean. I still pray that prayer. And at night, when I lay down tonight, I'm going to thank Him for helping me today. And I ask Him to help me to be a better man, be a better Christian than I ever been in my life. I tell people now today, my faith today is stronger than it ever was. I thought I had a faith before that. My faith, nothing like it is today. I've seen where God brought me from and where He's put me back now. I said, everything I lost in addiction, I lost my home, I lost my family, I lost my relationship to God. I remember I went and sold a 2000 vehicle. I had a Trailblazer, and I sold it. It was probably a $20,000 vehicle. I went and I traded that for $4,000. I sold it for $4,000. I took the $4,000 as straight as I could to the dope dealer and paid him for drugs I owed him. And I was on the street, but I didn't have nothing. But I said, everything that I lost in addiction, God has given me back in recovery. He's restored my relationship to Him, my relationship to my wife, my relationship to my children, my grandchildren, stronger than it's ever been. My wife, I hurt her deeply. And like I said, it's hard for her to talk about it. She'll get angry, and she'll tell you today, she can't make me not take drugs. But she'll tell you if I take drugs again, I'll never come back home again. She'll let me know that also. But I give her and my children all the credit in the world for helping me to get to where I am today. I preach every week. I preach at the Ioneus Church of Christ on Coldwater. I thank those people that they welcomed me back. Many of them did, and I work with them every week. I talk to people many times one on one. I'll go to any group and talk to them. I won't tell the sick part of my addiction to you all tonight, but I share with them how sick it was and the things you go through. You get down and you count pennies. I found out drug dealers, they'll take pennies. That's money to them. And like I said, I don't blame them. I blame myself. But when I got clean, fellas that wouldn't give you a pill on credit, saved their life. When I got clean, and they found out I was clean, they would come to me and offer me drugs. That's how some folks are. And, I tell them, I say, I don't want to talk to you. But I don't blame them. I blame James. And so that's where I'm at today. I work for the church. Somebody said, "What do you do now?" I said, "Well, between church and grandchildren, I stay busy." But I'm thankful to be here tonight. And if you got any questions or anything, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Well, first off, I just want to thank you for sharing that with us. That was a bunch of stuff I didn't know. And just so people know, I mean, I literally grew up in the church where James preached. I've heard this man preach I don't know how many sermons. He was always a positive influence in my life, kind of a almost like a moral compass for me. And the fact that you're willing to sit down and share that makes that even stronger. I just want you to know that. James was always that kind of that person for me. I always looked up to him. And because my grandmother thought so much of you and I thought so much of her, it meant a lot to me. So one question I had, you said that, you could take it on the weekend or, one thing, but then all of a sudden you took that one pain pill and boom, it was on. Did what they gave you change? Because we hear a lot about like Oxycontin. That's what got a lot of people. Did it change what you were taking, or was it?
When I began, the first pain pill I ever took was called a Darbycet. And after I got straightened up, and then I got hurt again, I went back. The next thing that they offered was hydrocodone 10. All right, and that's where I started. And then after that, the last time, it was Roxy 30s, Oxycontin, Oxycodone, and it got stronger. But like I said, I got to the point of where I don't care how strong it was, I had to have it to live. Not there was no enjoyment whatsoever out of it. And I just want people to know that what God has done for me, He'll do for them. I'm nothing special. God is, and He will restore their life. And like I told you a while ago, I would wake up begging, crying, screaming to God. God never done a thing for James until James got up and done what I could do. The part that I could do, God let me do. What I couldn't do, God has took care of that. He's handled the rest. And again, I give Him the glory for it, for my life. And to the day that I die, I'll still be an addict. I'm in recovery, thank God. But I'll still tell my story, and I'll tell people, like I say, I go at it approach of faith. I don't go at it as anybody asks me, I tell them what worked for me. But like I say again, if something works for you and you can do it and get off, do it. And that's, I just want to share my story to help. I've shared it, I don't know how many times. I share it on Facebook. I've talked with people on Facebook I've never met in my life, probably never meet this side of heaven. And, I just want to be an encouragement. If I can overcome drugs, you've heard people say this. If I can overcome drugs, anybody can. I can literally say that. I was 59 years old when I quit. I hear the young people say, "Oh, I'm too old to quit." No, you're not. As long as there's breath in your body, you've got hope. And I say to families that have people that are in addiction, as long as that loved one is alive, there's hope. But you cannot enable them. The reason I stayed in addiction so long was I was being enabled by family members. I didn't have the money to go out and buy Roxy's 30s, 30 of them. I had family members that did. And as long as that enabling was there, I went right along with it. But again, God will do some good things in their life if they allow it.
Talking yesterday, we talked about, when you was in the midst of your addiction, that you felt like you wasn't hurting anybody else.
Right.
It was just all about you. So kind of how do you feel about that now, looking back upon your addiction?
That's one thing that my family would tell me all the time. James, you're hurt. You're killing us. And when I was in addiction, I thought they were crazy. And I said, I'm not hurting nobody but myself. One thing that really, should have got my attention, besides my family, is one of our elders at church came to me and said, "James, we're going to withdraw fellowship from you. You're not going to change." And I told him, I said, "I'm not hurting nobody. I said, I don't know what you're all upset about." He said, "You're killing everybody that loves you." And that's what addiction does. The one that's doing it, you can't see that at the time. I look back now and I see I was killing everybody. Not just the people that loved me, but people that knew me. I was hurting them. I'd burnt my name in the community. And I don't know if I ever get my name back. I try every day to live a better Christian life. But you hurt everyone. And when you get out of drug addiction, you see that. But when you're in it, it's all about you. And I tell everyone, especially families, when you're dealing with someone in addiction, you're not dealing with your husband or your wife or your child. You're dealing with the drug. The drug is controlling their life. The drug controls my life. The drug would tell me that, James, you can never be happy again. You never laugh again if you give drugs up. And it's got such a hold on them. And it gets to the point that you don't know that family member no more. I lied to people, never lied. I hadn't told a lie in 40 years almost. Lie to anybody. It's the drugs that's got the control. And it'll do a number on you.
So going from being a well-respected person in the community, and then when you went through your addiction, then when you got to the other side of that, where you were back involved in the church, did you have that insecurity as far as you walk in and in a small town like this, everybody's seen your struggle, and kind of what did that feel like as far as getting back up in front of the congregation, thinking in the back of your mind, well, they think I'm going to fall off the wagon again next week, or did you get a lot of support?
I had people watching me. The first thing I done when I made the decision that I was quit drugs. First thing I done, the next Sunday, I went back to church. I wanted to crawl under a rock and hide. You can hide stuff for so long, but when the truth comes out, and you think everybody knows it. I thought everybody in Martin County knew what I was doing, but everybody didn't know it. But still, in my you get paranoid when you're like I mentioned about the walls. You come to my house, JD, the doors are locked right now. If I go out of my house to my front porch, I lock my door. I got paranoid, and you think that you think everybody's against you at the beginning, and I thought people didn't want me back at church. And I don't know how many people I have talked to that have quit drugs and went back to their church. And those people wouldn't have a thing to do with them. They didn't want them there anymore. And I had people watch me that, I told them, I said, they're kind of like crows sitting up on a bar. And they're watching you, waiting on you to fail. And there were people watching me, and I'd say there's people today who watch me and would love to see me fail. But the people that truly love you, they accept you. People at Coldwater, they accepted me. Like I say, I preach every week. I serve that congregation. That's my life now. I do it. I don't get paid for it. I do it because I love the Lord and I love people. But everybody's not for you. And that's a hard thing. But you learn the ones that love you. They were there. They had to withdraw from me. They had to pull away when I got into it so bad. But when I got straightened up, they were the first ones there. And I never mentioned about my wife. I got straightened up there, and my wife, she was living in the house. The brothers, they brought me off, and it was her home, her house. And we started talking slowly, and I said, is there any chance me and you could get back together? And she said, well, I don't know. She said, we'll see. And we talked for months. And we finally got to the point there. I was ready to come home on September the 7th that night. She wasn't. And we went for months there. And I asked her one day, I said, how long is it going to be before before we can get back together? And she said, well, I'd like to see you go at least a year and not take drugs, and we'll talk about it. And she said, we'll get back together. And I took and we probably went from September to April. And I had stuff in storage lockers, books and stuff, junk it was. But to me, it's stuff that I had and I couldn't sell or couldn't give away for drugs. And I said, would you care if I start moving some of my stuff back home? And she said, well, we'll go slow. Said, you can move a little at a time. I called her going to work. It was in April. I moved everything I had, and she come home. I was there that evening. And I moved back in. And but like I said, I broke her heart, and she's a strong woman. She didn't lose her faith through it. She remained faithful, and she'll tell you right now that, you know, if I mess up, I'm gone. But that's not why I stay clean. I had to quit drugs for James. As much as I wanted to quit for Marlene and my children and grandchildren and the church and God, I had to quit for James first. Every relationship that I destroyed, God has helped me win that relationship back. We've mended those relationships. Now, people ask, well, how long does your wife trust you? It took a while for her to trust me. And, you know, every time I go out the door for a long time, you know, she was worried that, well, he come back and be on drugs. And now she'll look at me and she'll say, don't you have somewhere you need to go? Give her a break, get out of the house. But I thank God for all that.
So, the people that were your enablers, like, how's the relationship changed with them since you're now in recovery versus what it was then?
Well, the ones that enabled me the most were family members.
Right.
And when I first got off drugs, I went probably a year and I would not go around them. Because when I ran around them, it would remind me. I tell Marlene, I tell her, when I go back to the farm in the old house over there, it was just like I go back there and it's like going into a prison. And that's what my life had really become like when I was by myself. It was, there was no joy to it. It was a prison. And I felt that way, but I stayed away from them for a long time. When I got off drugs, I told Marlene, I told her everybody ever bought a drug off of me. I don't want no secrets. I took and showed her places where I would go and meet people and buy drugs. So no one can come out and say, well, did you know James done this? I'm honest. You asked me for the truth, I'll tell you the truth today. I want to be remembered as someone that my word is my bond, and I work on that every day. Some people I'll get it back with, some I never will. But I've still got to go and live my life serving God.
So you've come out of addiction and you're back home. But how's the relationship with your kids then? I mean, I know you're with Marlene a lot of the time and spend a lot of time with her and getting her trust back. But now you got a lot of other people that you hurt besides them. So how was that? Trying to mend that tear that was caused there.
They were like their mommy. You know, they'd seen Daddy quit once before, and they watched me for a long time. We're closer now than we ever been. And like I said, the relationships I destroyed, God has helped mend those relationships. But there's people in the community that will still they'll remember James when he was in addiction. But I'm not that same man today, and I thank God. But like I said, God will help us. If we do our part, He'll do His part. But you can't force someone to quit. I don't care. You can lock them up from now on to the end of time. If they don't want to quit, you can give them all the Suboxone methadone in the world. If they don't want to quit, they're not going to quit. Like I said, I had to quit for James first. And when I quit for James, I could make all these relationships. I mended over. And like I said, my marriage is better than it's ever been. My relationship with my children, I broke my children's heart. They never seen their daddy. Like I said, they didn't know who that man was. My grandchildren, I thank God they were small. I had one grandson. He remembered me when I was in addiction. And the people you love, that's the ones you pull away from. You know, that the drug will take you away. But again, God will help. He'll help me in that.
One of the things that we're trying to do with this podcast and this series in particular is just come at this from different perspectives. You know, we talked with Matt. He was younger when his started. He went through a completely different journey. Yours started when you were in your 40s. You've been through a completely different journey. So what I'm interested to know, because there's a lot of different, I guess, ideas of how things can work. I know that you're doing some counseling now for people who are struggling with addiction. What is your approach when you're talking to them? Is it mainly faith-based? I mean, obviously...
Mine is all faith-based. But I will tell people, if Suboxone works for you and gets you off, do it. But Suboxone or methadone is not meant to be a lifetime thing. I remember when I was struggling, the first time I wanted to get clean, I had a friend of mine and she was on methadone. And she told me, said, James, said, you need to get on this methadone. Said, you can work, you can function, it'll help you. And I told her, I said, no, I've always told any doctor, anybody, I said, I won't trade one drug for another drug. And that's the way I look at it. This lady is still, she's on Suboxone today. This has probably she's been on it probably for 15, 16 years. That's why I have a problem with methadone and Suboxone. And like I say, if it works, those drugs are not meant to be lifetime. And I have went in clinics and I was telling JD, I talked to probably high 70 and 80 in a day, and they sat and they bawl and cry, and they said it's the worst drug they've ever on in their life. They gave up maybe whatever, they might have given that opiate up, but now they've got this, and it can't, to get better. Like I said, you don't, no addict, I didn't grow up to be an addict. And no addict wants to get clean, you're going to hurt. You're going to have some physical hurt. And that's what held me back for a long time. I didn't want to hurt. Like I said, 2 weeks, I thought I was dying. Laid in the bed there, I'd get up and I'd go to church, and I'd come back and I'd lay there. And the funny thing about it, when I told you I went back to church, and my wife, my wife never did lose her faith. My wife stayed faithful to God, and I never will forget the first day I went back. And I come back, she sat on the back row. We still sit on the back row right now. We've done that for years. And she was sitting there, and I walked back there, and I sat down on the back row beside her. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to sit here." I said, "This is our seat?" And she said, "No, this is not your seat." I had to go up to the front of the building and sit by myself on the building. It took a long time before I get back there on the back seat with her.
So what do you think, because I know obviously it sounds like faith is what pulled you out of that, but also sounds like that you had a strong faith when you fell into the addiction.
Yeah, I did.
So what type of resources or education do you think that would maybe help prevent this for... Because a lot of times we talk around kids and around younger people, but just, a middle-aged person, as far as just preventing, taking that first step and getting there.
I tell everyone today that drugs can happen to anybody. I'm a perfect example of that. I would be safe in saying in Martin County, just about every family in Martin County has been affected one way or another by drugs. Got a family member, someone close to them, someone to go to church with. And we need to talk about it. I was told when I first got off drugs, James, you need to be quiet. You don't need to say nothing about it. I think we ought to shout it from the housetop. People need to see that there's people that has been where they're at and come out on the other side. And that recovery is possible. We do recover, though, saying it. Some of us do recover. And we want to share that. I want to share my story. If it helped one person, if I tell it 1,000,000 times and it only helps one person, it's worth it. We need to start talking we need to talk to our children. I talk to my grandchildren. I've got 2 12-year-old granddaughters, a 19-year-old grandson. And I don't know if I mentioned it to you. I don't have one of them on drugs, haven't taken a drug in their life. My children, I've got children haven't taken a drug. My 2 son-in-laws, my daughter-in-law, I'm a blessed man. But we talk about it. And like I said, Marlene, we'll talk about it. Marlene will cry sometimes. She gets angry still yet today. Because I look back, drugs robbed my family about 10 years. Took me away from them and all, when I was my body was there in the house many years, but I think we need to talk about it. What you're all doing here, I think is great. And like I said, everybody comes into addiction different, and just about everybody that I know is going to get out of it different. What worked for James Maynard may not work for somebody else. Like I said, the methadone, Suboxone, I didn't want to trade the opiate for that. Mine is faith-based, and I encourage people to come to church. The Lord can do for us what we can't do for ourselves. And I'd encourage anyone to bring your family up in the Lord. Like I said, I had 30-some years of faithful Christian man. And still today, I talk about it. I went to other congregations. I preached on. In preaching, I tell them my story. I want to share it. It's too, we've hid for too long. Those Narcotics Anonymous don't tell nobody. Hey, listen, we need to talk about it. And I appreciate what you guys are doing here. I think it'll help. Everybody's not going to agree. Everybody's not going to agree with me, but if they get better, I'm all for them. I'll pull for any man. I don't care what he has to do to get clean. I'm for him. I pray for him. But we need to talk about it.
Well, I agree. I don't think that there's really any one way. I mean, thus far, what we've done interview-wise, I think that what's good about trying to have these different perspectives is, like you said, what worked for you is not going to work for everybody.
No.
You went straight cold turkey. When you talked about what you did, you went straight cold turkey. Some people, Matt went cold turkey, but some people are going to need those tapers. And I think that as we go through this interview series, if we can kind of hit from all these different perspectives, hopefully those people that are listening out there that are potentially addicted or are going through something similar to what you have will hear something that maybe clicks for them and will help, because we all know it's a big problem here. I mean, it's a big problem here. I mean, you're
Still
right.
is.
Everybody that I know, I have a cousin that's on the run from the law right now because of drugs, opioids, meth, all that.
And he has been for about 4 weeks now.
Yeah, right.
Since we did the first.
Yeah. So, they've been on the run for probably 2 years.
Oh, okay.
So, everybody has been affected by that. And I just appreciate you sharing what you have, because I think he's right. I think James is spot on. I think you do need to talk about it. I think it definitely helps.
So you're doing this counseling, is it just through the Ioneer Church of Christ, or who?
I do it.
Just personal thing?
Personal to anybody
Okay.
who come to the church want to talk.
Okay.
I'll talk with them.
Right.
Do you go anywhere? And do you actually go anywhere and visit with people?
Yeah, I went and visited. I went, like I said, to these places, out places where they go. I went there and talked to people. And like I said, the internet can be one of the finest things in the world, or a piece of garbage. But I've used it. I've reached out. I told my story on recovering addicts. I told it on there, and I don't know how many people's contact me, hundreds and hundreds. I go out in the community, and I'll be in a store or go in somewhere. Someone will come up to me, and they'll start talking. They'll start bawling, crying. Then tell me their situation. They've got a loved one in addiction, or they lost someone in addiction. And how in the world can we be quiet when all that's going on? But we got people that's hurting, and we can help them.
And I think that's great as far as just talking about it, because I think here, especially at a local level, is there's so many people that are hurting. Nobody wants to be a drug addict.
No.
But they don't realize how many resources they are. We think about resources as just being establishment or just being here or there, which is great. It's a blessing that we've got those things. But we have people here in the community like yourself that people can just reach out to or come by and tell their story and at least get some direction. Because I think the one thing that we do know is we got a long way to go with this epidemic. And like you said, this is not a one-size-fits-all for recovery. And there's going to be a lot of different routes that people take. But I think just talking about it, and that's why I appreciate you sharing your story, because that's powerful.
That's like it. You mentioned about do we do anything at church? I taught probably a 6-month class on bad habits, how to avoid bad habits, and we hit addiction, went through it for probably 3 months. in the adult Bible class. And we just need to talk. I mean, like I said, I'm ashamed of what I done. Let me say that before I leave. I'm ashamed of my addiction, but I'm happy for my recovery. What I went through has made me a better man, made me a better husband, better father, better grandfather, better Christian. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but it's made me a better man. And like I said, if it were not for people loving me and were concerned about me, I wouldn't be here today. They didn't give up on me. They didn't enable me. The ones that truly loved me didn't enable me. And I thank God for those type of people. But as long as they're alive, you got hope.
So I know we're getting close on our time. You guys have any other questions for James before because I have the last question I've always been asking before I end it. Do you guys have anything?
No, I do want to say one thing about me stopping and seeing James, and you're talking about your name in the community. When I heard James was on opioids or on pain pills, whatever, I mean, I was blown in the water. I could not believe it. James Russell. So, I was like, I'm not going to run up and down the road here and talk about James. I'm going to stop.
Well, I feel the same way because, like I said, I grew up listening to this man preach.
Well, he married me in Juanita.
Yeah, and so when I heard the same thing, I was blown away. I was like, this can't be true. And I'm just happy that you've been able to make it out the other side of that because, like I said, you've meant a lot to me in my life, whether you knew that or not. But the question that we always end these interviews with is, if there's somebody out there listening who's struggling with addiction or has family that's struggling with addiction, what could you say to them that, hey, there is a way out of this? I mean, what kind of advice, or if you could give advice to somebody who's struggling, what could you tell them?
Like I said, mine is, I turn to God. I mean, I left God, I turned back to God. And I deal in faith. But there is hope. There's too many of us, and I know too many people in Martin County that won't talk about their recovery. But they have recovered. And I know it's hard on a family. My family didn't have the resources that are available now when I was going through it. Find you somebody to talk to, find you a good program to get into. And people ask me, do I attend the NA meetings? And I tell them I don't. And I tell you the reason I don't. The first meeting I went to, the man, he told me, I was sitting there, and he said, "This is your God." And he patted my back of my chair, and I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "This is your God." Said, "This chair is going to get you off of drugs." And I told him, I said, "That's not my God." I said, "Man, you got a different God." And I quit going then. But they have meetings over here at Inez. They're doing great work over here. Inez First Baptist has a meeting every Tuesday evening. I've been to those, several of them. We've got people in the county that will talk with you that have went through it, that working in addiction. Like you say, Matt Brown and him, I think Matt and him's doing a great job. They're helping a lot of people. And there's all kind of programs out there that when I was in it, like I said, I went 4 days and they told me I was cured. It didn't work. But it's worked for almost going on 5.5 years now, and I thank God for it. And if anyone out there, they're welcome to come to Inez. If your church, you weren't welcome there, come to Inez. We'll welcome you there, and we love you, and we'll let you pass me in the past. We move on.
James, I can't thank you enough for coming. I said, and being so open and candid with us about your struggle.
Blown away. I'm blown away.
Yeah, and I really can't thank you enough. And
you're welcome. Thank you all for having me.
Well, yeah, and so I guess, guys, that'll take care of this one. From myself, from Brad, from JD. Thank you for listening to the Just Add Bourbon podcast.